Hey channel, Fernando from SkyFi Audio. Sitting beside me is a Cello audio palette equalizer, one of the most formidable pieces of equipment we've had in our shop. Now we've had a few over the years, but they're still pretty rare, pretty special. And in this video I'm going to go over what makes it so unique and why you might want to consider an equalizer for your home system. The audio palette was designed and built in the 1990s and would have been offered to fairly wealthy individuals as part of a system consisting of amplifiers, speakers, etc. It was very, very exclusive and absolutely beautifully built, almost to laboratory grade standards. Well before the days of very reliable remote controls, this piece would have been possibly sitting next to your couch where you could reach from your seating position. They even sold a really cool acrylic stand that would sit it on the floor that was on wheels. And you would have had some very long cables going back to your system. Why? Because you would want to be able to sit at your sweet spot and make adjustments to the audio signature. It came in two different flavors. One was just a straight equalizer, which I don't have. But then this version here actually has input selection and an output level, which makes it also a preamplifier. So technically this could be considered a preamp equalizer at this point. And you can see here we've got a set of 4 inputs and then the ability to change our output level. Now there's no phono built into this. This was the 1990s when phono was beginning to kind of die off. But Cello did make other products. The audio suite in particularly that had a wonderful phono card as an option. But this was not it. This is line level only. Over the years, we've had the privilege of buying a few of these systems. A lot of them were sold here in New York City to wealthy individuals. So, you know, sold in the 1990s. Now you fast forward till today, these systems are now aging to a point where, you know, the original owners are no longer around or they've moved to other places. So they do come up from time to time. This particular one came to us from Eastern Long Island, and it was part of a huge system. It consisted of a bunch of amplifiers and a set of speakers that's also on our website if you want to take a look and see what would have gone with this. To give you an example, here's a picture of a system from a few years ago. This was a full reference system, and that included the audio palette here, the dedicated equalizer, and the preamplifier, which was card-based, absolute piece of art, and had a card for phono and several of the inputs. And you see here 4 channels of amplification. Each of 2 of these boxes is a single mono channel. So this speaker here would have been powered by 2 amplifiers consisting of 4 chassis, and the same for the other side. Here you see a better picture of the audio suite preamplifier. And this is a power supply, much like I just showed you. This had the ability to power both the audio suite preamp and the palette equalizer. The speakers were line arrays well before anyone did line array speakers, and they were separated pretty interestingly. So remember how I mentioned there were 2 channels of amplification? Well, one channel would have powered 1 woofer and half the mid-ranges and half the tweeters, and then the other channel powered the other woofer and the other half, which was pretty crazy. Here's another shot of the 2 pieces. Here's a picture of the system that came with the palette that I'm featuring today, and the same speakers in black, called the Grand Stradivari. And then we've got, along with this package came at least 3 sets or 4 sets of these mono blocks, as well as some stereo amplifiers, the Duet 350s. I was hoping to show you a picture of the back of the speaker. There it is. There's a monster amount of connections. So that's essentially 1 channel for the speakers, woofers, mid-range, and tweeters. And there would have been 2 sets of those connectors. And this is the power supply for the palette. And on the back, you'll see the umbilical that connects the 2 pieces together. This is carrying all the DC voltage that is needed. And the other thing about Cello is that it uses these Fisher connectors. A bit of a pain, but obviously very, very high quality. This is a laboratory grade connector. It's smaller than XLR. I call it a mini XLR, but I'm pretty sure it's called a Fisher connector. And this is found in a lot of the pieces from Cello, and we've been able to kind of make our own cables to match, but it does present a problem if you don't have the right cable. You can appreciate the casework here. It's all beautifully brushed and anodized aluminum, very light construction, but again, that laboratory look is what they were going for. In the video, we're going to show you the internals and how special some of these controls are, as well as the circuitry and the layout. So Ben will dive in deep to show you how these things are built. So equalizers have been around for tons of years, right? But super high quality, very low noise floor equalizers are much, much more difficult to find. This is probably the best or highest quality you can find on the market. Most of them, the ones we've had, have gone to studios or professionals. As a matter of fact, this piece came in and sold quickly, and this is going to a famous musician who wanted to complete a system. Not quite sure what they're going to use it for, whether it's on the recording side or on the playback side. But I have seen a bunch of studio interior shots where you could see Nick sitting next to the engineer, an audio palette. And why? Well, it gives you some pretty subtle control of the frequencies. We've got here 6 ranges in total, from 15 hertz all the way to 25 hertz. And doing this and doing it without injecting noise into the signal path is difficult. As a matter of fact, McIntosh recently came out with an equalizer, the MQ112. One of my favorite pieces of kit. I'll link to a video that I did on that last year. It's a formidable piece as well, just as quiet as the cello, but a fraction of the cost and readily available. In the video, you'll hear me discuss why an equalizer has a place in an audiophile system. And to cut to the chase, it's mostly to correct for bad recordings. It's not to correct for room. If you want to correct a room, you get a DSP system or a room correction system that can take the bumps and the highs and the lows where you don't want them. But an equalizer is really more to correct a recording. Let's say you've got something from the 80s that was in the early days of digital and it's a little too harsh. Well, there's no better way to tame it down than to mess around with these 2 knobs here on the right. Same for the mid bass and the low bass. Lets you sort of get a little bit more full range out of a recording that was maybe a little dynamically challenged. So you can really tune a certain recordings, and I know you know what recordings those are. You know, there are some really famous recordings out there that are just a little shy of perfect. So at the top here we have essentially the input-output controls, and at the bottom we've got a row of the equalization. So 15 hertz, 120, 500, 2K, 5K, and 25K. So this is right above our hearing level. 15 hertz is also pretty low. Obviously these interact with each other and they sort of have overlap. So we're not talking about a very specific frequency, we're talking about a general frequency range. And then these are both input attenuators for left and right channel. This is to kind of tame your input signal. Phasing, ability to go left, right, 0 or 180. Equalization, this essentially enables and disables or brings the equalizer into play. Selecting one of the 4 inputs from the back, and then lastly our output level, which is essentially our output gain. The controls are laid up in a very particular way. At the bottom we've got our 6 channels of equalization divided into frequencies, so low to high, so at 15, 120, 500 hertz, and then 2K, 5K, and 25K. This is above our hearing level for humans, and this is pretty low, 15 hertz. These are not absolute frequencies. This is sort of like a range of frequencies, and there is some overlap between the two, obviously. Up top, we've got our input and output selection. We've got both left and right channel input gain. The phasing to go from 0 to 180 degrees, and you can also select left and right. Equalization, this essentially brings the equalizer into and out of the signal path. Our input selector for 4 inputs, I'll show you the back in a second, and then it's our output gain. On the back you can see the inputs that we talked about. They're over here. The chassis is sort of split horizontally. So we've got our 4 inputs here, and one of them is a Fisher connector, left channel, right channel, and then the outputs. We've got both main outputs in Fisher and RCAs, and record outputs for tape machines. The umbilical, and before I showed you how you could actually use this power supply to connect other cello pieces, well, that's what this bus bar here is for, as an input and an output. And same for here, you could tap into either one of those two. Next, we're going to connect it up to my system here at my home, upstate New York. I'm a little tight for room, so I'm probably going to pull out the turntable and place the cello here, and then insert it into a signal path. If you're new to the channel, this is my reference system, and it changes all the time. So right now I've landed on a pretty sweet Nagra system. I'm super happy with it. For a turntable, I've got an SL 1200 GLD, which is a very limited release, totally pimped out Techniques turntable from a few decades ago. It's a pretty sweet piece. I'm still waiting for my own SL 1200G. All the ones we get go to buyers, so I haven't been able to get my hands on one yet because they're in such high demand. But that's eventually going to go here. I'm going to get one in silver. I'm going to apply the wood plinth that we sell here at SkyFi Audio. This is a Nagra CD player. It's called the CDC. It's a beautiful CD player. I've done a video on this before, so I'll link to it below. Below it is the Nagra VPS, which is the phono section it's dialed in for a moving coil right now. And over here I've got the Nagra MPS, which is a power supply that powers all 4 pieces, which is pretty sweet. And it has the ability to power them directly from AC or from battery power, which is another neat way to get your ground level or the noise floor even lower than possible. Above it is the Nagra Jazz, which is a tube-based preamp, which I love. A little bit light on inputs and outputs. I wish it had a couple more balanced, but I'm making do. Above it is a DS Audio phono preamp. Going to be doing a review on this. Not quite ready to talk about it yet. And then for amplification, you'll see I've got an odd setup. I waffle back and forth all the time between solid state and tubes. So I actually have both. I've got about 100 watt solid state amplifier here called the MSA. And then for my flagship amplification, I've got these Nagra VPAs running in one of my favorite tubes, the 845, running about 45-50 watts. And that is just perfect for the Jadis Eurythmies here. Crazy looking speaker, and they sound as good as they look. Sorry for the dark image. Here we go. Oh, and then over here I've got a fairly simple but efficient record cleaning machine from Project. We sell quite a few of these. It's a really nice step. It's not that expensive, and it's made out of aluminum, which is what I really wanted. I didn't want one of these sort of like particle board cleaning machines, and it does a wonderful job. Okay, I've connected it up to my system. Because I have a mixture of single-ended and balanced here, I wasn't able to do an optimal configuration, so I did use the RCAs, and the way I'm connected for test purposes, I'm going from the CD player to the equalizer, then to the preamp, because that's all single-ended, and that was the easiest way to insert this into my system without having to make special cables right now. Our test subject today is going to be this very famous recording by Getz Gilberto, from Stan Getz and João Gilberto. So it's original master recordings, part of a cool collection that I've got here. You'll notice that this Nagra CD player has the laser mechanism on the drawer itself, which is the best way to do this. Close.
De graça, ela menina que vem que passa.
All right, it's going to be hard to talk over the recording, but I want to just give you a sense of what this sounds like. I'm going to put the microphone down in a central location, and then I'm going to play with the controls so you can hear the differences. Now, I'm not going to be able to talk while I do that, so just pay attention to what I do.
Estou tão sozinho. Ah, porque tudo é tão triste. Ah, beleza que existe. A beleza que não é só minha, que também passa sozinha. Ah, se ela soubesse que quando ela passa, o mundo sorrindo se enche.
Okay, we've got the Cello audio palette up here on the bench. We just finished servicing this piece. We replaced a bunch of electrolytic capacitors in the power supply, and there's like a regulated power supply inside of the audio palette itself, and made up a custom cable to interlink them together. So this is a device called the master power supply that sends a regulated DC voltage into this chassis, and then it's regulated further and feeds all the circuits to run the equalizer. So if we take a quick look inside, it's kind of a series of PCBs that are sandwiched on top of each other. So we're looking at one channel on the top, and there's an identical version of this on the bottom for the second channel, and then the regulated power supply board lives in the middle. And one of the interesting things that they chose to do on this preamplifier EQ is to pass all of the signals and all of the power supply voltages through standoffs. So when this thing was built, all of the PCBs were stacked on top of each other and it was kind of built up piece by piece.
Awesome.
If we take a look on the back side of these controls, they're all custom-made precision attenuators. So you'll see a stack of precision resistors around a circle here, and then there's a ball bearing that sits inside of a machined piece of metal here. So this is kind of like a custom-made control with PCBs stacked on top of each other again. But this offers extremely precise control, and we can see these little lines on the front that indicate each one of the steps, usually in dB. Looking at the controls on the front panel, we have input left and right. And as I manipulate these, if we look at the scope, you'll see that I have two channels running simultaneously. So as I adjust this control down, we'll see one of the channels dropping. What do you need?
No. Okay.
Okay, I just didn't know what your finger was doing. Okay. So this is how you would control the balance on the device. Instead of having an individual balance knob, you would just adjust one or the other channel here. This is an interesting feature here. You can maintain absolute phase by having it in the 0 degree position here. And what that means is the signal that's coming in from your source will be maintained, its phase will be maintained at the output. We can flip it so it's 180 degrees out of phase. You could use this if you had a power amplifier that didn't maintain absolute phase. And then if we go the other direction with it, one more click, it will reverse the phase of the channels. So you can choose which one, left or right, is out of phase from the other. So an interesting phase control there. This just toggles out the equalization. You can have it out and run it flat just as a simple preamp, or toggle it in. On the controls down here, we have 15 hertz, 120, 500, 2 kilohertz, 5 kilohertz, and 25 kilohertz. So these are key audio frequencies that can be boosted or cut to fine-tune the signal to your liking. So just an example, if I manipulate the 2 kilohertz control, this is a 1K square wave, so it contains the basically all the frequencies at a step of amplitudes to create the square. So as I manipulate this control, we get a change in the square wave. And the thing to notice is that we have two channels here simultaneously, and the adjustment is extremely precise because of those precision attenuators. So we get very precise control, which allows you to shape the sound exactly how you prefer.
Can we see some of the other frequencies?
Sure. So if we go at the very top, we'll see it affect the wave on the very portion here. So if you were to do like a high filter on a vintage amp or something like that, it might look something like that. This is a treble boost. If you had a loudness, it might look something like this, where you're boosting the bass and the treble. So that's how like a loudness control looks. So you can do kind of a awesome variety of different configurations. So if you have a certain genre that you like a little bit more bass or something, you can adjust it out to your liking. Looking at the back of this unit, they've done something kind of unique. On most pieces of hi-fi where you have an external power supply, there's some sort of proprietary or common connector, sometimes an XLR, which will give you a ground and a plus-minus voltage. In this case, they supply these custom cables, and you wire one chassis to the other on these terminal blocks, and then cover them up with a extruded aluminum shield so that they don't make contact with anything. And another thing that Cello did on these is used a connector called a Fisher connector, which is a very specialized locking mini XLR type connector. So that's how the balanced connections interface on this piece. So you have single-ended on simple RCA, but the balanced in and output are done on Fisher connectors.
Yeah.
Most of the components inside of the Cello audio palette and the master supply are of such high quality that they don't really need to get replaced. These are a lot of film capacitors and precision mil-spec resistors. There's not a whole lot that can fail in here. And one of the other interesting things is there's an output relay here, and they've even socketed it. So if this relay was to ever start acting up, we would just order the same one, pop it out, and stick a new one in. So this is really doesn't require a lot of service except for the electrolytic capacitors. So this set of 4 capacitors here came out of the master supply, and when I pulled them, they actually measured okay and the supply was working, but we've had other units that had a different, they might have been stored in a different environment or might have been used more frequently, and the capacitors in those other master supplies failed in this location, so we went ahead and preventatively replaced those. And then in the audio palette itself, in its regulated power supply, we had this Sprague capacitor here that you can see some kind of physical leakage of electrolyte and this damage here, and this had some goo that had come out on the board. So because this is built in kind of that sandwich fashion and it's kind of hard to get to this supply, we opted to replace all the parts that were in there, even though one was there was only one that had fully failed.
And the rest?
The rest, these ones all tested okay, but after the full replacement, the unit functioned much better than it did before we did the capacitor replacement. It was basically blowing fuses until we did this maintenance.